What is up, plant people? Hey, today is Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021, and we're back with another episode of the Planthropology Podcast, the show where we dive into the lives, careers, and general amazing awesomeness of some really cool, really amazing plant people. I'm Vikram Baliga, and I'm your host and humble guide through this journey through science and plants and ecology and whatever else we can think of to talk about fish. We could talk about fish. We might even talk about fish today. It's really hard to say. Who knows? So I'm getting back into interviews. Isn't that great? You know, during July, I was a little bit snowed under, or actually during towards the end of the semester, I was a little bit snowed under and didn't really have time to record a whole lot of interviews. And so I ended up doing some solo content, some plant tips, and some other things that I hope you enjoyed. Looking at the download numbers, it seems like you did, and I've gotten some good comments about those. So you will probably very likely see more of that kind of content going forward, just from time to time. Whenever I feel like doing a cool solo episode or there's something pressing I need to talk about, I will probably do more of that. So today's interview is one that I've been trying to do for a while. I first contacted this person like months ago, back in I think April or May or something like that, and then the end of the semester hit and my life went bananas and bonkers. And so it didn't happen, and it just kept not happening. And finally, at the beginning of July, I got to talk to my friend, Dagmar der Weduwen. And she is a science communicator. She is a PhD student researching archerfish. And I know what you're thinking. Fish? My friend, fish. This is a plant podcast. It turns out that Dagmar's master's degree is actually in seed dispersal in plants, which is really something that I think is very fascinating. So I was thrilled when she reached out, again, months ago saying, hey, I know something about plants. I would love to talk to you. And I'm very glad and very excited that she did. So, I don't have too much else to talk about. There's actually going to be a mid-roll today. This was one of probably the more chaotic recordings I've done in a while. It was the first one I'd done in a long time, and there kept being interruptions, so you'll get to hear some elevator music today. We haven't done that in a while. It'll be fun. But without belaboring the point more, you're going to love this episode. Dagmar is just fabulous. She's fabulous, and you're going to love her. She's great. But go ahead and while you're doing this, pull up your phone machine or your computer machine and go subscribe to Planthropology wherever you're listening. If you haven't done that already, go to somewhere and leave a review and follow on social media in all the places. But that's all I got. So get ready to hear a great one about science communication, archerfish, seed dispersal, and just pursuing your passions and your interests. So it's time for episode 54 of Planthropology with my friend Dagmar der Weduwen. All right, well, we're back with another episode. I'm going to start that over. Oh, my goodness. Should be a long day. It feels
like a Monday. Oh God, yeah,
goodness.
It's morning for you. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. It's 9:30 here, and I'm about halfway through my coffee. All right. Well, we're back with another episode of Planthropology, and I'm really excited about today's episode. It's one that we've been talking about trying to do for a while, and life is what it is, and it gets busy. But mostly on my end, I get busy and I get distracted. But my guest today has really just such a wide breadth of experience in the sciences, and I'm so excited to hear from her. So I'm here today with Dagmar der Weduwen, all the way from Scotland. I'm so excited to have you with me today. We've been friends on Twitter for a while, and how are you today?
Hi, yeah, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, and again, we first, I think, tried to record this we started talking about this back in like April.
Yeah.
And then I dropped off the face of the earth for about a month at the end of the semester.
That's all right. It happens.
So, how's your summer going so far?
Yeah, it's good. We're finally getting some nice weather in Scotland again. It's been a lot of rain. It's nice, lots of plants around because there's been a lot of rain, but I can't go outside to enjoy them. Uh,
I mean, that's good. I live in a very dry, hot, sometimes, I'm not going to say terrible. I like it here, but a very dry and hot part of the world. And so when I hear of people that like get rain regularly, I'm always a little bit jealous.
it can be nice, like it's soothing if you're inside and you don't need to go out, but it can get a bit depressing too. And I have to go outside like every day to go to the lab, so then it's nicer if it's not raining.
Well, yeah, okay, I can see that. This okay, so we'll stop talking about the weather soon, but I have to know because I think about this a lot. So I've started recording more with international guests. At first it was a lot of people that were at my university, and then it kind of branched out. When we talk about summer temperatures, I feel like I have really poor context for what the rest of the world is like because it is. Let's see. Today, it's actually we've had a nice summer, but normally in July we're like 45 Celsius or hotter. What's it like there where you are? I just want to live vicariously through you.
Like 15 degrees in the summer, between
Oh my
15 and
goodness.
20. Yeah, it gets to like if it's like 10 degrees Celsius here and it's sunny, it's what the Scots call tops off weather. So everyone just walks around shirtless. And I'm Dutch, so that's not really weird to me because, we're almost on the same latitude.
Sure.
45 degrees I think would kill me.
It's something else. It's you kind of I used to run a landscaping company in a former life, and we had a summer where it was about 45 every day for 3 weeks in a row or something like that. And at that point I was just like, I have to do something else. I can't.
Yes.
It's too much.
I
Anyway,
can
this is
understand that, yes.
neither here nor there. Has nothing to do with anything. I'm always curious because like we just sit here and melt, and then there's I don't know. Anyway,
I mean, it's like
so
17 degrees here today and I was melting, so.
oh, that sounds lovely, like really lovely. Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I have enjoyed through some of these recent episodes getting more international perspective on academia and science and just life in general.
Mhm.
So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about where you're from, what got you into what you do, and all that.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Um, I was born there and lived there until I was 10. And then my family moved abroad because my dad worked for the UN. So we spent a year in Israel slash Palestine, both of those,
Hmm.
different parts of the border. Um, and then we moved when I was 11. We moved to Kenya for 4 years and lived in Nairobi, which was amazing. I mean, when I lived there, I was more used to hot weather because it's on the equator and stuff. Um, and it was really cool, and it just kind of like gave me this whole new perspective on like all the things that are out there in the world, both
Hmm.
like the natural world, but also like cultures. And I'd always been quite drawn to like animals, and I think when I was like 5 or 6, I told my older brother I wanted to be an Arctic biologist when I grew up. Uh, that's a bit
That
too
sounds
cold
fun.
for me. It sounds fun. He made a lot of jokes about like seal trapping, um, which is less fun and not really biology, but brothers. Um,
Yeah.
but then yeah, we moved to Kenya, and there was just so many, such a different ecosystem, such a different environment, and such a different way that people interact with the world around them. Because a lot more people are much more connected to nature than they were in the Netherlands. Netherlands is tiny; it's very crowded. We'd go to the woods or to the beach, but it's not like you don't live in the woods or by the sea or something in
Right.
that way. That's people in other countries still have that connection with nature.
Yeah.
So I kind of rediscovered that, or discovered it when we lived there, which was absolutely incredible. And then when I was 15, we moved to New York City, which is the exact opposite. For, um, so that was an interesting experience. It's not for me, such a big city. It's like New York City's got like half the population of the Netherlands lives in
Oh,
just
wow.
that city, and it's too much. But I loved going to Central Park, spent a lot of time there, looking for cool creatures and plants and things. And kind of started to, I was in high school trying to
Mhm.
figure out what I wanted to do later. And I started working at a wildlife rehabilitation center called the Wild Bird Fund. They were at the time and possibly still the only wildlife rehabilitation center in the city. So it was a lot of pigeons, mostly
Sure.
pigeons, but sometimes they'd get in swans, or I think they had a few opossums. We'd get baby squirrel season like twice a year, and the vets would walk around with like baby squirrels just clinging onto their scrubs. Um, and it was just absolutely amazing and made me decide I wanted to be a vet. You know my like career path a bit, so
Yeah. Yeah,
probably
a little
sitting there
bit.
like, you're not a vet. What are you talking about? um, but yeah, I really enjoyed that, and it was going to be either vet school or a biology degree, so I could stay
Okay.
involved with working with animals. I applied to vet school in the UK. I didn't want to go to university in the US.
Mhm.
No offense, but I
No,
don't
none
like the
taken.
system there. So
Yeah, none taken.
okay.
You're right. You're not wrong.
And well, I didn't get accepted into vet school, so I ended up sticking with the biology degree, going to the University of Edinburgh, and realized there that I probably would have gotten really bored if I'd become a vet because it's
Hmm.
very repetitive. I did a month-long internship with a vet in the Netherlands when I was 17, and it was cool for a month. But after that, it was getting really boring. It was just, people with the same animals bringing in the exact same problems, and I
Sure.
like a bit more variety. Um, so Edinburgh turned out to be the perfect choice because I managed to get involved with a bunch of research projects, studying human behavior within the biology department. So, the focus on like the evolution of human behavior and how it's
Sure.
similar to how animals behave rather than psychology.
Mhm.
And a study that ended up being my dissertation project for my undergrad, traveling basically across like a 250-mile transect in Scotland in the summer, looking for blue tits in these specific sites, and recording like everything we could about these birds. And I ended up collecting all of their nests and doing some experiments with those. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, it's never really been like close to plants for me, but then I started working with these nests and seeing how these animals use plants. And that really made me decide, okay, I need to become an ecologist because that would allow me to investigate how all these things, relate to each other, how they interact with each other. Um, and I really, really enjoyed that research. But when I was done, I wasn't sure if I just wanted to focus on animals. So I decided to study plants for my
Okay.
master's, which was an accident. I heard about this research master's program at the University of St Andrews, um, and I looked at like the list of projects that were available, and this one supervisor was offering a project on predator-prey interactions and like mimicry, things like that. It sounded really cool. I kind of wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I emailed him, and he emailed me back and said, well, we can do that, but here's like 19 other ideas for master's projects that you could also do. And the one on winged seed dispersal just kind of caught my eye because I never thought about that. Did a bit of research and realized there's a lot that people don't pay attention to when it comes to winged seeds. There really
Right.
isn't a lot of research there. And those are like my favorite kinds of things to do. My best part about research is when you discover something, you get a result, and for that brief moment, you're the only person in the world who knows that. That to
Oh, that's
me
such
is like you've just discovered something new, And then you go out and share it with people, which is the other fantastic part. But for a brief moment, that knowledge is just mine.
Oh,
Um,
that's such a cool way to look at that.
yeah.
And I think it's a in academia, it's such a healthy way to look at it too, because I get down on it sometimes because I've been in it for a while now, and it, in different capacities, both in the teaching, research, public outreach kind of stuff, and sometimes I feel like we like I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but we kind of just go through the paces, and it's do the next thing, publish the next paper, write the next grant, go for tenure, go for this, go for that. And at some point, I think for a lot of us, it's that joy of wonder and discovery that got us into science in the first place, that got us into research in the first place. And that's such a cool, like, just way to think about it, that maybe we can keep being excited about the things we're doing even after a while in the field.
Yeah, I think the fact that I look at things that way just stems from when I was a child. I loved reading about like explorers and stuff, and like the 18 whatevers who would go out and discover a new species. And of course they weren't actually new species because all the local people already knew about them, but they'd come back and they'd tell all their friends, look, I found this thing, it's called an armadillo. And or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to be one of those people who would go out and find new things that no one ever heard of. Which I think you can do in like physics or like chemistry. You can find new things no one's heard of. Biology is a bit more difficult.
Sure.
They don't really like physics. And well, chemistry's fine, but biology's better.
Hot take. That's fine. I like it.
Every time I'm on a podcast, I start a fight with someone.
That's okay.
Apparently.
That's why it's fun.
Yeah. I'm here to antagonize. But yeah, so I ended up doing this research on winged seeds, on samaras, and never expected that was where I was going to end up with my master's project. But when the first meeting I had with the guy who ended up being my supervisor, I went and looked at his Google Scholar profile just so I could read like his last publication, see what he was up to. And there was within like the last year before our first meeting, he had published on theoretical physics, paleobiology, statistics, like other ecological concepts. He just does everything. So he just kind of threw me into the deep end with these seeds, which I enjoyed. But for almost the entire year I worked with him, he called the samaras samsaras because he had no idea what I was actually doing. He didn't know anything about these seeds. He just thought they were cool and that we should study them more.
Okay, fair enough.
Which I think, I'm gonna take that with me and just go, you know what, if you think something's cool, you should just go and study it. And it doesn't matter you're not an expert in that particular area, as long as you do the work in a good, consistent scientific way.
Well, and that also, I really am enjoying the way you think about science, because again, we spend so many years specializing. All right. At the PhD level, which you're in that process now. It's like you pour your whole life and all of your energy into this like one thing, and sometimes I think even as PhDs on the other side of the dissertation, it's really easy to kind of put blinders on. It's like, I do this and this is what I do and this is my job and that's it, to the detriment of all else. And I think that's really a good, and maybe some of it is cultural too, versus the like we said, the US system of academia and all the tenure and all the stuff that we do here. And I know that exists everywhere. I know that's not just, but I work with a lot of people that are really great scientists, but it's all about in some cases very basic science, that it's like, we study this one interaction and this one thing and this is what we do, and they know everything about it, and I think that's awesome. But I've always been, I think, maybe like you are in some ways, sort of a generalist in my approach to science. Like, I want to know a little bit about everything.
Yeah. I mean, I do call myself an ecologist. I am an ecologist, but the specific like subset of ecology that I do, I'm still not settled on.
Sure.
I've done the blue-tid work I did was nesting behavior and like climate change adjacent. The plant work was plant dispersal, and now I'm working on fish behavior, which is completely different from the other two again, and learning especially, which I didn't do with the birds. And I don't know if I'm going to stick with learning at the moment.
Sure.
I'm enjoying it.
That's good.
Love to get back to plant-animal interactions at some point too, which I did get to do a bit of. But yeah, I'm not settled on anything, and I think you hear a lot of people who are at like my career stage, early PhD, who feel like they have to settle on something, and I just don't think that's necessary. Um, I try to tell
Yeah,
people like, it's fine. I know
it is.
many things about like many topics, but I'm not an expert in any of them.
And I think that's totally fine because our uh, life and careers are both short and long at the same time. Like it goes quickly, but we do have, I think, time to explore the things we like. And I think a good message too is that it's never too late to find something new that you love.
No,
You know,
absolutely.
at any point in your career.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I want to hear I'd like to hear a little bit about the research you're doing
Hmm.
now, and then I kind of want to go after that back to some of your master's
Yeah.
research and a couple of these papers you've published. But
Hmm.
let's talk about archerfish, because that's, I think,
Yes.
what you're spending your time doing now, and I find them so fascinating. I know honestly almost nothing about fish. I know that I can go catch a bass sometimes, and that's about it.
I almost know nothing about fish too, so we're in, I know lots about archerfish at this point, but most fish I'm like, I don't know what you are or what you do. No, so as much as I enjoyed my masters, I did kind of miss working with animals. And I saw an ad for a PhD project working with archerfish in my department in St Andrews, advertised by the guy whose office door I sat next to during my masters. So I just, went up, knocked on his door, was like, hey,
Sure.
you haven't met me yet, but I want to be your new PhD student. And that worked out quite well. Ended up getting the funding for the project. And it was all about, determining whether these fish, archerfish, can be used as a new model for learning studies. A
Hmm.
lot of learning studies use, apes or ravens, crows, those kinds of birds. Fish really don't come up in it very often. You get people who do things with sticklebacks and with guppies, but archerfish have these really cool mechanisms that might have a lot of learning involved, a lot of like complicated neurology, despite their brains being the size of a grain of rice. That could provide a lot of information for our own human evolution, the evolution of learning in other animals, and even I've heard it could potentially be used in robotics, and that's just
Wow.
really cool. So yeah, it's now been 2 years that I've been working with these fish, so get to go to the lab every day, and the fish then spit at me because I'm too slow at feeding them. That's their whole gimmick. They spit
Huh.
jets of water. They can shoot up to 6 feet. Um, I've seen them do it. They hit the ceiling sometimes in the lab, and
Wow.
yeah, it's impressive. But they like to aim at my face when they think I'm being slow. Um,
Feels rude, but okay.
yeah, they know I'm the one who feeds them. They recognize individual humans, so they don't
Wow.
spit at other people really. But when I come in the lab, they kind of follow me and they're around to the tanks. They're like, "Why are you feeding that tank first? Why are you walking over there? Okay, now she's coming over here." And then, they're kind of like, all swim up. It's a bit like having like a lot of dogs, but they're
Sure.
confined in a small space and filled with water. Um, but yeah, I've been studying basically how they or whether they can learn specifics within the spitting behavior from each other. So, teaching them to spit at a specific target and then seeing if the other fish pick up on which target they have to spit at, things like that. Um,
Wow. That's
yeah.
fascinating.
And just general group dynamics, like if there's more fish around, are they quicker at shooting or not? Because they're really aware of everything around them.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, they're amazing. I absolutely love them.
Well, and to me, just the fact that they can recognize individual humans is kind of mind blowing, right?
More
Like,
than They can recognize more than 40 different human faces in the experiments that have been done. And
wow.
these were pictures of human faces,
Sure.
but then when they rotated the faces around to show them a different angle, the fish still knew which one image they'd been trained to shoot at.
That's I'm processing that. That's
Yeah,
incredible because we
they're
don't.
absolutely amazing. A lot of my psychom's been trying to persuade people that fish are a lot smarter than we might think. in their own ways. I'm not saying they're going to do like complex algebra or learn to ride a bike, but
Well,
they're
sure.
perfectly adapted for the environment they're in, and that makes them pretty smart because we can do a lot of the things they can do. Um,
Yeah.
they're better
Well,
at some things than like pro athletes are.
that's
Their jobs,
incredible.
so they're amazing. Yep.
Well, and I think that actually paints such an important larger picture of the way that we view life in general, animal life, other organism life, because I think we're and I don't know that it's our fault. I think it's part of our evolutionary biology is that we're very focused on things that resemble us closely.
Yes.
Right. So we're human centric, but then we go to mammals and we go to, and I think we tend to attribute quote unquote intelligence, whatever that really means, ultimately to things that resemble us most closely.
Absolutely.
And then we start to think, oh, well, this bird's pretty smart, right? It can do this and that.
Yeah.
But then I think the farther we diverge from our bilateral symmetry and the weird things that we do as strange apes, we tend to get farther and farther away and tend to think, oh, it's just a fish, oh, it's just a plant, oh, it's just whatever, when it may be that we just don't understand, right? We don't
Yes.
understand their form of intelligence.
Well, exactly. Yeah. No, that's exactly what I think.
I talk about this with plants sometimes that I'm not going to say that plants are like thinking, feeling beings like most animals are, but they do have their own forms of communication. They do interact with their environment in an active sort of way. They're not just like a passive organism that just hangs out there. Which I think actually leads us into our or your master's research about seed dispersal and reproduction in these Samara bearing plants. So can you tell us about some of the research you did and a little more specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. I mean, I can't call what I researched plant behavior because I think a lot of people would get mad at me for implying that plants can like make these conscious decisions. But it's kind of like a behavior. It's something they're adapted to do. And it varies in how they do it based on circumstances. So, just because it's not an active decision doesn't mean it's not a behavior.
Sure.
But yeah, so I researched the secondary dispersal of Samara bearing plants. So they're those little helicopter seeds mostly. Mostly work with sycamores because they're what I could find most around St Andrews.
Sure.
They do a bit of work with ash trees too, but ash dieback and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, there's been so much research done since like the 50s on how these seeds spin and the physics of their their flight and how they travel from the tree to the ground. But not much after that. And that seemed a bit odd to me because most of these seeds land within about 30 meters of the parent tree. Some of them definitely get further away. I think it's about 5% on average. But in order to get further away, they need to be uplifted above the canopy. So that's dependent on lots of weather factors. And it's only because the wind speed above the canopy is much higher than it is lower to the ground. So then, these seeds can be dragged for miles. Lots of research has been done on, trying to predict how far these seeds can go if they do get above the canopy and how that differs if there's more or less leaves on the trees. And that's cool. But then when they're on the ground, everyone just seemed to have gone, well, that's it. They're on the ground now. Time to go do something else. And that just seemed so strange because these plants, they're really good colonizers of environments that have been, affected by some kind of disaster or barren environments, volcanic islands, things like that. But if only 5% of those seeds ever get very far, then it seems like they shouldn't be so good at what it is they're doing. And these wings, they're an important part of their life cycle, but when they're on the ground, they don't just fall off. They're, firmly attached to the seed itself, and they remain for a really long time. So how does that then affect what happens to the seed when it's on the ground? So that's really where my curiosity came from. And I ended up doing a whole bunch of experiments, only one of which has been published, so I'll tell you about the others too. Looking at how the wings affected predation, how the wings affected flight once the seed was on the ground, how the wings affected whether or not the seed would survive in water, and whether or not
Hmm.
they would be able to germinate afterwards. Um, just trying to figure out a bit more about this secondary dispersal stage. And the nice thing about plants is that the primary source of dispersal, whatever that may be, if it's flight, animal dispersal, that's important. But the secondary stage doesn't have to be the stage that the seed's been adapted for.
Sure.
So,
Right.
these winged seeds, the wings are really good for flying, but they also help with buoyancy. So they're really good at staying afloat on the water. And if they fall in a river, they can go for miles. But we don't really know for a lot of species how that affects whether or not the seed can then germinate. Maybe it'll be too much water and the seed dies, or maybe it's fantastic and all the seeds will grow really well.
Right.
Um, so really, and it also depends how far they can go and how long the wing remains intact. So I spent about, the year in which I did my master's, I spent a lot of time running around St. Andrews trying to find lots of seeds, drying them out in the greenhouse, and then putting them back outside, but in
Hmm.
specific locations and configurations.
Right.
So my predation experiment, I cut out like a lot of these sycamore seeds, put them in petri dishes in varying amounts of cut and uncut seeds, just to see, an uncut seed is quite hard to open. You need to open the casing before you can get to the actual nutritious bits.
Right.
So if you provide it already, like prepared, it's probably a lot nicer and will disappear a lot faster. And it did. Lots of mice and things, I think, picked up all of these seeds. But if there were more uncut seeds in the same petri dish as the cut seeds, then it wasn't removed as quickly because these uncut seeds covered the cut seeds. And
Huh.
because these
Okay.
seeds in nature, they don't all fall off the tree at once. They'll go in waves depending on the wind. They get knocked off by the wind, essentially.
Right.
So the first batch will fall. Wing will start to degrade, might expose the seed. Next batch will fall and cover the first one. So it's almost like, this mechanism to protect the earlier fallen seeds might exist here that no one really thought about before.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, huh? And and you're right because I've seen some studies in plant dispersal. I don't know how familiar you are with mesquite trees.
Not very.
It's an acacia,
Okay.
so it has these big like kind of I don't know twisting seed
Yep.
pods, and they're very common here where I live. They're natively a South Texan and Mexican species, but they were kind of spread throughout the state and throughout the region with cattle drives and different things like that. So that's very human driven. But there was a grad student here doing a study on coyotes
Mm-hmm.
and how they dispersed it because these mesquite beans, these seeds are really high in protein. They're a very important secondary protein source for carnivores and other mammals.
Yep.
And even indigenous peoples used it. They would grind it into flour, do a variety of things with it. So, I've read a little bit about it, but the actual again using the word strategies is interesting, but I think it's accurate, right? Where
Yep.
that first flush of seeds drops, you get some cover with the second one, and I kind of read through your paper earlier. Do you have thoughts on why maybe those? And you kind of answered this already, actually, but why those winged structures maybe helped protect the individual seeds, not just as a cover, but on an individual basis? Was it?
Yeah, I think it's just because when I did this experiment, I think it was like autumn. I can't remember exactly, but there was quite a
Mhm.
lot of other food sources around that might have been more easily accessible. Um, and these seeds, they get the best above canopy dispersal in spring and autumn because there's less
Sure.
foliage, so then the wind speed's better or something. I don't understand meteorology or physics. Um, so that's when a lot of these seeds let go of the trees. So I think these seeds, because they're just so tough to open, I did find some of them, yeah, the animals absolutely, they would eat the seed and leave the wing in the dish.
Hmm.
So it was happening, but it wasn't happening in as large amounts as the cut seeds. All of those were gone from the dishes that just had cut seeds in them. And within like maybe even hours after I put them out. I only visited
Oh,
every 24 hours, but they were gone quickly. Um, so I think it's just the extra energy they have to put in to try to get this seed out.
yeah.
Because if there's something else, over there's an acorn that's a lot easier to access or whatever, then they'll go for that instead. These seeds are small as well. They're packed full of protein, but they're not. It's not a large meal, even for a small
Gotcha.
animal.
Oh, and that makes sense. And there's maybe and this just, I'm not really an ecologist, but it seems like there's a time factor to it, right? As well. So
Absolutely, yeah.
these small prey animals, if they have to spend more time trying to crack
Yep.
open a seed pod.
Yes, and I did run this experiment next to a public footpath, so there were people with dogs. I did hide the dishes; they weren't right next to the path, but it's not it's not the nicest place for
Hmm.
people. For mice, people for mice to spend a lot of time. Especially it was next to a residential neighborhood, so I'm sure there's not wild cats, but cats wandering around too. Um, yeah, they just don't spend too much time in the open. And I mean, that's classic foraging theory, but it does get applied to plants, obviously, because so many things eat seeds and, fruits and things. But no one thought about it in these winged seeds, really, that the
Right.
wing might play this important role because the seed germinates when it's still attached to the wing. The wing doesn't need to go anywhere. So
Yeah.
if you've got this protective casing, then you've got maybe more chance of surviving than some fleshy fruit that's fallen next to you.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting. And in terms of dispersal too, I think we talk, we have lots of oak
Yeah,
here in Texas where I live, and they drop their seeds. They tend to drop their seeds right under the canopy.
yeah,
It's a big, heavy seed, and
yeah,
there's lots of competition. So you get some selection based on competition, but then we have tons of rodents and
yeah,
other animals, and it's funny to look at the cycle of oak tree germination based on squirrel populations and how they are always in flux.
yeah,
Like you'll get a big acorn load, and then the squirrels hide seeds and forget where they are and all of that, and then the next year you get a huge squirrel population,
yeah.
and then they eat more seeds, so your oak tree seedling population goes down, and then they kind of follow each other, and it's really interesting to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah, there was actually an similar experiment done, I think, with pine seeds, which are also samaras,
Hmm.
technically, in the 90s, where a guy, I think, doused them in like some radioactive substance and put them out in the woods, and then went around with a Geiger counter and found like all these buried caches of these radioactive seeds that had been hidden, and he'd cover them again and then come back like the next year, and so many of them had remained. He
Huh.
collected all of them that he could find. There's definitely some like radioactive squirrels like wandering around in Utah or wherever that was.
That sounds like Utah in the 90s.
Yes.
That's very on brand.
When I first read that, I went to my supervisor and I said, there's no way that I'm going to get permission to do something like this. It's there.
No, but it does sound fun.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
I just want a Geiger counter.
Yeah. Well, we had squirrels on campus. I went to Texas A&M, which is in kind of the southeastern Texas or south central Texas. And there was extra funding one semester, and they put little radio collars on all the squirrels, and you would see students with big antennas just walking around campus trying to find squirrels. It was hilarious and amazing.
That's amazing.
Um, so no, that's really fascinating research, and I think that all of these things paint a bigger ecological picture
Yep.
in and potentially too in the ways that changing weather patterns and wind patterns and animal migrations changes our native populations and the
Yep.
existing populations of plants
Yeah.
and animals, just
Yes.
the ecosystems
Yeah.
in general.
No, there's I didn't rely on this heavily, but after the last ice age, a lot of these samara bearing trees managed to get as far as they did just because the seeds were light and they'd get high in the air or they'd move across water. Um And once the seeds are on the ground, they usually don't go very far, even in gusts of wind up to like almost 50 miles an hour. I stood on the beach with a bunch of undergrads and had them chase seeds when I like let them go and the wind would come and the undergrads would chase the seeds. I think the one that went the furthest went maybe 50 meters, but most of them stayed put.
Okay.
And, even I left seeds out for like almost 2 weeks, barely moved. But if they're in the water, when I spend a few weeks just submerging these labeled seeds in a river stream next to my department and then like pulling them out every day, taking a picture with this app that would tell you how much of the leaf area had decayed. And so in moving water, after 2 weeks, the wing area had only decayed 40%.
Oh, wow.
Which isn't that much.
Right.
They don't float for very long, so after about 3 days, they'll stop floating. But if you're in moving water, you could stay at the surface longer. And seeds that I left out just on the ground or in tubs of water in the lab, they barely decayed at all over those weeks. I think maybe 20% for the ones that were just out on the ground and 30-ish% for the other ones.
Wow.
In the tubs. And then I did try some germination experiments where I then tried to, see if you cut the seed out and put it in water, fresh and salt water, how does that then affect how well the seed germinates? And then nothing germinated in any of my germination experiments. So I don't know. Probably has some kind of effect. Salt water can't be very good for plants, but
I know
whether the wing protects them, possibly.
That's
There's a research project for whoever's listening. Go do that.
No, that'd be really interesting to see.
There's not been a lot of work done on that. My main resource for that chapter was a paper published in 1888 in German. So I used translation that was available from 1907.
Isn't science fun?
It's so fun. My markers kept asking me, "Are you sure there's nothing more recent than this?" And it's like, no, just two German guys that cut up a bunch of plants and put them in water and saw what happened.
That's all there is.
Yeah. Often that is the case. Just some old German people.
Can we pause just a second? I think there's someone waiting for me outside my office. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
Of course.
Well, hey there. Welcome to the mid-roll. It's been a few episodes since we've done one of these, so it's nice to have it back, right? Or do you hate it? I don't know. You let me know. That's my son screaming in the other room. I don't know if you can hear that on the mic, but it's very possible that you can. So, this mid-roll was supposed to contain a trailer for the Just the Zoo of Us podcast, but I couldn't find it. Like, I have it somewhere. It exists, but I couldn't find the file. So, I'm just going to tell you that you need to go listen to the Just the Zoo of Us podcast, okay? So, it is hosted by a dear friend of mine, Ellen Weatherford, and her husband, Christian Weatherford, and they review animals, and they give them ratings out of 10. And it's hilarious, and it's wonderful, and it's family-friendly, and just an absolute delight. But one of the reasons I wanted to plug that show in this episode is that Dagmar had an episode on Just the Zoo of Us as well, talking about archerfish. So that was episode 92, if you want to go back and listen to it. And by if you want to, I mean go back and listen to it. It's great, and you'll love it. It's wonderful. Again, you've heard her so far today, and I don't see any reason why you shouldn't go do that. And while you're at it, go subscribe to Just the Zoo of Us and follow them on all the social medias at Just the Zoo of Us. They are probably one of the best Twitter follows that you'll ever follow. I promise. You know, aside from our show, which you should definitely follow Planthropology all the places, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can find me and the last of my self-respect over on TikTok as @ThePlantProf. Also, I, as well, got to be on Just the Zoo of Us, talking about plants, of course, but we talked about some of the weird things plants do. We gave them ratings. We talked about some ecological interactions. That was episode 102 that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it made me so happy. It made me so happy. Again, Ellen is one of my favorite people. So go listen to Just the Zoo of Us. Go follow Planthropology all the places on the social medias. Connect. Let me know what you think. And if you would like, go drop a rating and review for the show somewhere, take a screenshot, send me a picture, and I'll drop you a cool sticker pack in the mail. Yep, you'll get free stickers just for leaving a rating and review, hopefully 5 stars. I wear a size 5-star rating on either Apple Podcasts or Castbox or Podchaser or whatever. Those links are in the show notes. So, have you listened to me talk long enough? I think you probably have. Back to the show. So sorry.
That's all right.
We just had some new locks installed. We had a break-in pretty recently. So our facilities guys were here putting in new locks. So this guy was just like standing outside my office staring at me. I was like, okay, I'll go talk to him real quick.
It's a bit weird.
Yeah, I know it happens. Well, again, I have my office is like all windows pretty much.
Yeah.
And so people can like always see me in here. It's weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so we were talking about we kind of finished up talking about seed dispersal, or we were wrapping that up, and how long these seeds will last in different environments. So I do think the idea of trying this in different types of water systems, in saltwater, freshwater, maybe even like marsh environments, that might be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think I chose the saltwater because I'm slightly obsessed with the island of Surtsey, volcanic island that just popped up outside of Iceland. Because it's such a cool thing that, these scientists managed to go there and record every single creature and plant that arrived there and check what actually established. Because so many seeds would arrive and nothing would establish. And it's just really cool that people could go and do that. And there were tree seeds that arrived, and I think something like 50% of all seeds that arrived weren't adapted for water dispersal, but they still did, and some of them established. So I was like, well, maybe all trees can do this. Let's find out.
No, it's really interesting. Yeah. And probably to some extent, there's, plants are nothing if not adaptive to environments. And, they spread well. And, I guess when that's what you do, that's what you do. It's pretty interesting. So I kind of want to move on where we've got a few minutes left, but I want to hear more about the SciComm work that you do, because you use, I think, you're one of the best science communicators I know. And I say that honestly. You're very well spoken, you communicate clearly, and I think you do such a good job of just in this conversation, but in a larger scale on Twitter and everything else. You do such a good job of taking really interesting topics that, us science nerds probably think are very interesting, and packaging them for people that are like, why should I care about this fish? That kind of stuff. And you just were in a SciComm competition. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm getting like really hot. I'm a bit flustered. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Apparently, my younger brother's been telling people he thinks I could be like the next big Dutch science TV presenter. So
that's cool.
We'll see about that. But yes, I was just, I participated in a competition called FameLab, which is an international science communication competition. Sadly, it may be in its last year this year, so I would love to encourage people to do it. But British Council is no longer going to be funding it, so I don't know if they'll keep doing it. But it's essentially like the 3-minute thesis competition where scientists have 3 minutes to explain any scientific concept of their choice. And I joined on a whim. I saw someone I'd done a different competition with last December post on Twitter that she was signing up to do FameLab, and I just went, yeah, sounds fun, I'll do that. And the first round was the St. Andrews heat, and I talked about archerfish eyes, because when they spit at insects above the water surface, they have to deal with the refraction of the water. So the insect, where they see it, isn't actually where it is. But their eyes somehow compensate for this. We're not sure how. And it's incredible. I mean, I don't research their physiology myself, but it's amazing. Humans can't do that.
Right.
Like, try to hit, I think I said something like, try to hit a fly with a super soaker while you're underwater. It's impossible. You'd never get it. And these fish can do it, and they can do it, 6 feet away. And it was a runner-up. My friend was the winner for the St. Andrews Heat, and I thought that meant that I was done. And then found out 2 weeks before the Scottish final that actually I was meant to be participating in that.
Oh, wow.
It was a bit unclear, and suddenly it was like, oh, I'm still in the running. Guess I better write another talk. And I talked about their artificial decision making, because it's another really cool thing they do that humans could never do. When they shoot down these insects, the fly starts falling, and of course there's lots of other fish around, lots of other archerfish too. So the one that
Right.
just spat at that fish, at that insect, wants to be the first one to get there. So these fish use something called a predictive sea start, which is actually a defense mechanism that fish use to bend themselves into a C shape to quickly get away from predators. And these archerfish have co-opted that and now use it to get really quickly to their prey. And within a millisecond, they calculate essentially where the prey is going to land and what speed they have to go at in order to get there. And if you were to drop 2 pieces of food into an archerfish tank simultaneously, they would, same amount of time, decide which piece of food would land closer to them and just go straight for that one.
That's incredible.
That's something pro athletes do, like, I don't know, rugby or American football. They throw something and they're not even looking and then they manage to catch it. But most humans can't do that. I can't do that.
Oh, I can't do that.
These fish are 6 inches long, and they're doing all these amazing things. So I got through to the UK final, which at that point I was going this is getting a bit crazy. I didn't really mean to get this far. And now there's cash prizes involved and an international final maybe. And I was the only animal scientist there. There was a couple other biologists, but more, biomedicine, what they call the red biologists. I'm a green biologist.
Okay.
That's what they call it here. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I do stuff with animals and things and plants. And then there was a bunch of physicists, and I was up against them, and they were all incredible people. And we spent a whole day filming, quite professionally. We were all at home, on Zoom.
Yeah.
But there were all these really cool judges who are professional science communicators. And we got all these biscuits and things sent to our houses. They gave us free stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was great. Didn't have to do any work for 2 days because I was busy with other things. And then I had to keep my mouth shut for 3 weeks after we filmed it because I knew who won. And I was the runner-up, the judge's runner-up, which I was shocked. Not as shocked as the girl who won. She was speechless. And it was very well-deserved win. But, the competition was, having, met these people and then this training with them and seeing their presentations, none of us knew which way it was going to go. And I talked about how archerfish can recognize more than 40 different human faces. And I felt a bit silly. I was doing hand gestures and stuff. And then when the judge announced that I was the runner up, he was doing the same hand gestures to kind of say oh, well, the person who's winning, put everything in a nice frame and did the same hand motions I did. Yeah, I had to keep my mouth shut. I did tell my supervisors because, they put up with me and my flatmate because I went downstairs afterwards and just kind of laid down on the kitchen floor because I was overwhelmed. And then I was really lucky because I got to watch the final on YouTube with my family. And my mom was visiting and it was fantastic. I hadn't told them. And I was also voted audience winner, which I felt a bit bad about because I have a significant number of Twitter followers.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm also very proud because, clearly people actually like the work that I do. I don't think they would have voted for me if they didn't.
No, you should be proud. That's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah. So I won £2,000 in total. And
wow, that's awesome.
Bought this really fancy new microphone, which you can see.
Yeah.
It's my first time using it, so thank you.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm going to use it to hopefully, I'm working on starting a brief YouTube series on fish and smart fish, what we were talking about earlier, these animals that are smart, but just in ways that we don't usually think about them being smart. So
that's so cool though, because an international competition is kind of, and the fact that you were just yeah, okay, I'll do it. Whatever.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah. No, I wasn't expecting to end up in the UK final at all, and especially not, winning two of the prizes from it. Um, but it was such a good experience, and for anyone who's looking to get into science communication, I can definitely recommend competitions like that, because even if you don't know what you're doing, it's good practice. It kind of gets your face out there. The public engagement team at the university now knows me, because I'm constantly like, "Hey guys, I've done another thing. Um,
Guess what? Yeah.
guess what? Put me in the newsletter again, please."
No, that's
And it's
awesome
yeah, it's just
though.
really fun. Yeah,
Well, and I think that is it's hard sometimes as scientists, as researchers, as academics to kind of get out of our shell a little
yeah,
bit. Again, that's not something, and I think this is actually an important point for people to hear. That's not really something we're taught.
no,
They don't teach us how to do those things. We just have to either figure it out or not. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
And I think we've all had a professor or a TA or something that, brilliant scientist, but maybe struggles to communicate that science well in a way that people can really
yeah.
understand. And it's so important to learn that skill, especially early in your career.
Absolutely. I mean, I think with the performance aspect of SciComm, especially with like spoken or visual things. I was a theater kid in school.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I do have some experience with, just sort of putting myself out there, even if I'm a bit afraid. But it's very different to then try to explain your science in a way that's everyone can understand. You need to find the right level to talk at. But what I really like doing, and what I learned from some of the science communication training that I got before I did FameLab was, use metaphors, use similes,
Yeah.
relate the science concepts to everyday things. And with my last FameLab talk, when I started my talk in these 3 minutes, for I think the first 30 seconds, no one knew what I was going to talk about, because I
Hmm.
talked about how humans can recognize different human faces and how many we can recognize. And then suddenly he brought up fish. And everyone kind of went, "Oh, never thought about that before." And I think that really helped to keep people engaged. If they're
Mhm.
not entirely sure where you're going to go with something, people get interested, you know? They're like, "Well, what are you going to do now? Which direction are you going
Yeah.
to take this?"
Well, for sure, and then it provides good context for understanding too, right?
Absolutely,
Like
yeah. Yeah.
you,
And
we have to be able to.
yeah,
No, go
and
ahead.
no, we're always taught, like, writing essays and stuff. You have to put everything in a broader context in the conclusion. But it's really important to put things for SciComm in a broader context, not just at the end, but from the very beginning, because otherwise people aren't going to pay attention. And if the broader context is just, "Oh, climate change is important," for example,
Hmm.
that's something people hear all the time. So you want to make it just different enough that people, you know, don't fully know what's going on yet. That makes people want to find out.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is such a great strategy because I think we have to relate. There's all these concepts, and I think you make an important point too that we do get a little bit of information fatigue
Yeah.
with like, oh yes, I've heard about climate change. Yes, it's been on the news and all this, but if you can relate it to something that's important to someone
Yeah.
that they understand that is relevant to their lives, it's so much easier in the long run to I say, oh no, I should care about this. Oh,
Yeah.
I do want to know more about this. It is important.
Yeah. And what people care most about is probably themselves. So relating things, and I don't mean this in a
No,
bad
you're
way.
right.
I don't
You're
mean this in
right.
a bad way, but relating things directly to someone's own person rather than like a wider group context, but relating it to an individual really, really works well.
Yeah.
Because people go, "Oh, hey, that's me. I do those things."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
I
rather
can
than saying,
recognize
"Oh, well,
faces.
the city, blah blah blah," it's like, "Yeah, well, I'm in the city, but I can move."
Sure. No, that's really fascinating. Um no, that's cool. And if you're out there listening and you don't follow Dagmar, you definitely should because lots of fun, lots of cool fish stuff and honestly just I like as well that you do and this is going to sound silly, but you are a real human being on the internet. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like
No,
it's
I
it,
I started the account to be just like, oh, hey, I'm a scientist. And then it's like, well, you know what? Yeah, I'm a scientist, but, here's a picture of my breakfast because I have to eat too, or whatever it is.
Well, and again, it is important context
Yeah.
that you care about these things and you are a normal human being. And so the rest of us kind of looking, it's like, oh wow, so this person eats breakfast just like I do, and I know
Yeah.
that sounds
Yeah.
silly, but it's the
But it
truth. That's how
helps.
it
It
works.
really helps. And I know I've spoken to people who are hesitant to put so much of themselves out there on the internet. I was too, but now I spend almost all my time on Twitter. Don't tell my supervisors.
I won't. Don't
They
worry.
already
I do
know,
too.
but just don't remind them of it. Um, and I just could kind of put all my thoughts that I feel like I want to share out there. Um, I remember making fun of people who used to do that when I was like 12 or 13 and social media was just beginning because so my brother's like silly friends who would tweet constantly at everything they do. I'm like, no, well, I'm in the lab, fish are acting like I'm late to feed them again. Let me just tell people. Even if I
Yeah,
told people the same thing last week, it's still happening. Or, I tripped and my foot hurts.
sure.
Want to complain
Those-
about this? Here you go. And I'll go back to, talking about fish at some other time.
no, that's great. That's really great because again, the small things matter, and
Yeah.
I think the day to day really matters.
Yeah.
I just looked at the timer, and this has been such a fascinating conversation. I don't want to keep you all day, um, but so having listened to a couple episodes, the thing that I always like to throw at my guests at the end of the episode is if you had a piece of advice, something that you wanted our listeners to take home with them, take away with them. It can be about fish, it can be about school, it can just be about life in general, whatever you want. What is like your best piece of advice that you would give?
So I was thinking about that yesterday after I listened to a few episodes. And I think it's got to be something that might come across as controversial to some very like hardball scientists. But
Okay.
what's really drawn me to science is when I was younger, I was like obsessed with like fantasy novels and things. Still
Hmm.
am. And, magic doesn't exist in the way that it does in those books in the real world. But I find that the natural world, the way it functions, is like magic. And if you just spend some time, you go out somewhere and just put your hands on a tree or look at a bird or observe whatever creature is around you, you can detect those magical moments. And I think standing still and observing those makes you a better scientist, makes you a better person, just sort of puts you into a wider context within the world. Um, so I try to spend my time doing that. Just go find a favorite tree. Have a favorite tree, go and visit it and observe the magic that flows through that tree as we go from season to season. And it's not real magic, it's science. And it's just, progression of life. But if you look at it the right way, it can feel like magic. And I think that's an important thing to hold on to.
I love it. Yeah, 100%. I love it. Uh, wow, thank you so much for talking with me. This has been so fascinating. I've really enjoyed just getting to know you a little bit better and getting to learn. You've blown my mind a lot about fish, about archerfish, and just a
Yes.
lot of other
So
things.
accomplished.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I've gotten to talk about my master's research because I never even got to present it at conferences or anything. And
mhm.
I was in the animal behavior department, so it's not like people knew what I was up to or understood it. So no, it's been really, really nice, and now I get to share some of that as well. And I love the
So,
podcast, so
oh well, I really appreciate that. That's awesome, and it's always fun to hear that. I don't. And this is an aside, but I've been doing this a couple of years now, almost 2 years, and still every time someone tells me that they listen, I'm like, "What? Why? Why would you do that? Don't do that."
because it's
But
great.
well, thank you. Yeah, it's this whole like imposter syndrome thing that I still try to. It's a
Yeah,
science thing. It's
yeah,
it's a
no,
people
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's
oh
not
yeah,
just a science
yeah.
thing.
I got loads of that. Um,
So where all can we find you? I'll put links in the show notes, but
yep.
where do you want people to track you down?
So I probably the easiest one right now is just Twitter, because I'm kind of changing things around everywhere else. So my Twitter is at DJ Weduwen, which is spelled Weduwen. I do have a YouTube channel. I'm not settled on the name yet, so I'm not gonna tell you what it is.
Okay,
There will be
fair enough.
links available on my Twitter once I figure it out. And I'm also
Okay.
working on a new website, like a proper website. So that will also be on my Twitter. But at the
Okay.
moment, I don't have any of those things ready yet. But yes, find me on Twitter. Every Friday, I post 5 p.m. fish facts, where I tell you facts about fish at 5 p.m.
And they're great.
And they're
that's
great,
very,
yeah.
very well named.
Sometimes plants come up. Plants have come up
Yeah,
several times, so there
it's
might be
true.
plants in there too.
I think it's
Um,
great.
and yeah, there'll be archerfish footage, just random life stuff. Lots of hats. I'm not wearing one
Lots
right
of hats.
now. Vikram's wearing a hat.
I am wearing a hat. I had
Yeah.
to put one on. But yeah, my hair is ridiculous. Anyway. Well, Dagmar, thank you so much for being on. This was great. Really great.
No, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. And all of you cool plant people out there, thanks for listening. Keep doing the thing. Keep being nice to each other, or start being nice to each other, depending. And we will talk to you soon. Y'all, here's another reminder to keep finding the magic in your life, whether that is in the pursuit of academics and knowledge, or in a pretty sunrise, or the bloom on a flower, or the way that an archerfish will take a fly out of the air and figure out where it's going to land. There can be magic in your life, and don't downplay that, and don't underestimate the importance of wonder. Thanks so much for listening. Y'all, as always, are the very best, and I do this for you, and I love you folks, and I'm so glad that you listen. Thanks so much to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science for all the support and for letting me do this great show. If you're looking for a great education in plant and soil science, if you want to learn a little bit more about the things that I talk about and learn to do what I do, check it out. We have great online programs at the undergraduate and master's level. And so wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you can come be a part of the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science. And if you're ever in Lubbock, Texas, please come say hi. And if you're ever taking a class at Tech, I would love for you to take my intro horticulture class. Y'all are great. You're wonderful. We probably won't have an episode next week, but after that, we've got 2 or 3 in a row. And I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but they're great. Y'all are wonderful. Talk to you soon.